problem. In a secular country or multi-ethnic country, like in many open-minded liberal country, the government already legalized and allow people to marry with different religion, with different ethnics. Basically, different ethnics are not in the issue also. But what we see is the main problem in those kind of society, liberal democratic country, that actually the harm, the barrier is not came from the government, but came from their own society. On how some exclusive group, some exclusive religion are thinking that their religion should not be interfered by any other people from outside religions, that they consider that as a sin, and some ethnic think that they are too exclusive to be joined, they don't want their son or daughter to marry with other ethnics. Some Chinese group, some Caucasian group, a lot of ethnic groups still think that way, ladies and gentlemen. So we believe that actually it's a real problem issue. Religion also is a big another thing, because those religions are more severe, doing a more extreme policy by saying that if you're married to another religion, you're out from our religion. Yes, we will actually become a problem, because it's actually threatening the individual freedom of persons, and we will government have intervened in some way in religions. So in this case, we will actually, the government of any liberal democratic country that allow those kind of marriage have to incentivize financially to compensate the cost that those individuals do to getting married in the interfaith and interethnic marriage. And indeed, by the end of the speech, I will prove to you and how the burden and the cost is actually really huge for those individuals to break the limit, and how the second is the interest of the governments to maintain a non-exclusive society, to actually promoting more tolerance by giving incentive towards the society itself. The first idea, how we believe it actually is harm the individual. No, we're not talking about alien. Because this is a tradition and it's cultural. Some family are thinking that if you're marrying another ethnic or another religion, you're actually betraying me as a father, as a mother. You're actually betraying the whole family. Actually, I'm going to kick you out from the family or anything, ladies and gentlemen. So we will not only the individual will going to kick out from the family. Also, we believe that actually those people are also harming because the community, some of them, the community that they live for the rest of their life, also thinking the same way, and they have to get out from the community, from their friends, from the college, because of they doing such extreme action. So we believe that actually those individuals are actually have to sacrificing some things that they don't have to do. They have to sacrificing their freedoms in order to get another freedom. If they really want to marry with another people from another religion, they might not accept it in their own church or in their mosque or in any religion activity. They might not invite it by the family if there is a family gathering or community gathering. That we believe that's not necessary, and for some people it's really needed huge step and bravery to actually do that. And we believe that actually those forms of discrimination from the society need being compensated by the government. Yes, sir.
Sir, could you please do us a favor and explain to us what sort of compensation, who gets it, when do they get that?
I'm going to the letter. I go to the letter, sir. Now I'm going talking to you first of all that actually this is going to harm the individual at the very first place. Now we're talking to you that now why government need to compensate this? Because government first of all need to send a clear message to the society that what government stands upon this issue. The second, government in any other discriminatory issue also have to compensate those individuals to do things that actually according to government favor. Now what is the incentive that we're talking about? It's actually a tax break for 3 years for this family who actually start the interfaith and interethnic marriage relationships. We believe those incentives are not really significant to make people fake their marriage at the end of the time, but we believe it's significant to help to compensate the cost, the moral cost that those people do, the psychological cost that those people have to sacrifice in order to do such bravery actions. Now I'm talking to you at the second instance why this is the government interest to do this. Because there's a long research talking about how exclusive groups are actually correlated with the tolerance within the society. That the extreme level of the exclusive groups is talking about how people outside your groups is actually have a lower degree compared to your group. Now in the more lenient degree relations, some group actually talking that actually maybe some people outside our group is actually equal, but you cannot blend your group within my group. But we believe, ladies and gentlemen, if your society is consistent or more consistent with more, consisted with more several groups that actually exclusive to each other. It's really hard to teach your society to become more tolerant to each other. And we believe that actually the tolerant society is actually the interest of the governments, because tolerant government is actually the tolerant society is actually the ideal condition when everything that the government would like to implement is going to work more effective and more efficient. So we believe that actually at the end of the time, not only that actually the incentive is going to be fairly compensate those individuals, but also the second issue is actually government have the huge interest to actually promoting the condition, the tolerance conditions within the society by giving incentive for individuals who brave to do that. More on that, ladies and gentlemen, in this policy will go within the education and socialization and campaign from the government to the society, and embracing and talking, discussion will happen, and teach those societies still thinking the group is exclusive and changing their mindset. That we believe, ladies and gentlemen, that actually this is going to reach the socialization will effectively reach the target of the policy, that actually changing the mindset of those individuals, of the family, to actually changing the mindset. And how this is going to be happen? Because within any policy and within any regulation the government give to the society, of course there's going to be socialization, and socialization is going to invite a discussion and media and stuff. And in these chances, ladies and gentlemen, the government will have a best access, the best effective tools to actually tell to the society that this is what government think. This is what government think upon the inter-ethnic and inter-faith issue. That which is wrong for you to actually limiting your family or limiting your son and daughter rights to actually marriage with another people. It's actually okay for governments to actually not only actually government allowing you, actually government providing facilitation for you to, if you would like to have marriage and promoting a tolerant society. This is going to be the best tool for governments to actually educate the society in the best manner to actually changing the paradigm that we believe is actually good in the government favor of the tolerant society. Now at the end of the time we already proved to you how it's fairly compensate the individual and how government have the best interest in doing this. We believe that actually government have to incentivize financially the interfaith and inter-ethnic marriage. Thank you.
Right, we thank the Prime Minister for his speech, for opening this debate, and now invite the first speaker of opposition, the Leader of Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, what we've seen today is a model that has several very strong weaknesses. First of all, they're talking about this idea of compensating these people who are marrying outside of their own ethnic or religious groups for a personal decision that they have made. When you compensate someone for something that has happened to them, it is because they have been actively discriminated against or they have been in some way damaged. We cannot be compensating people for decisions that they've been taking of their own accord, of their own desires, and going out there and actually doing something. And when we're talking about like compensating for moral loss, unless they're going to be taking their families to court every single time they want to do this for some kind of like personal damages, we can't be talking about compensation. So we're going to be looking at this as a case of incentivization and actually paying people to go into these marriages and actually do something about interracial marriages. But if we're looking at this idea, that the first thing that they brought up was that intergroup marriages are seen as like sinful. And so now we are going to be giving people money for committing sinful activities. So what we're simply doing is compounding any of these kind of societal problems that already existed in these communities. We're not actually alleviating them, we're only making them worse. They also talked about this idea that, you know, there's going to be a cost when you marry outside of your group because your family is going to cut you off and you're going to lose that level of support. But we would say that if a pair of people are not self-sufficient, their marriage has other problems beyond the fact that it's simply interracial, and the chances are their marriage should be like getting compensation for other things such as their poverty or lack of a job. They also talked about this idea that they need to have a clear message. But the only clear message that they're giving out in this resolution is that they are going to marginalize these groups that do find it abhorrent to marry outside of their religion. They're not promoting tolerance in any way by doing this because they're placing a price on people's beliefs or people's race. They're not actually creating something that creates a positive change. In fact, it creates a negative change, where instead of basing our system on non-discrimination, of saying that all people are equal and all people should have rights, now what we're saying is that because you are of this ethnicity, you have a price. Your blood has a price because now it is a commodity that you can get government money for blending it with some other person's ethnicity or religion. We can also see that they brought up this idea of tolerance by the government. But this is not enough because you're not actually incentivizing tolerance. Because looking at a model where, they're actually compensating families who are doing this, partners who are actually going into interreligious or interfaith or inter-ethnic marriages, if they want to do this already, then they've already committed to that ideal of tolerance. They've already committed to those ideals of breaking down these social barriers. You're not incentivizing them by doing so. They've already decided that they want to do this. So you're not actually doing anything. All you're doing is preaching to the choir.
But majority of the people are afraid to do it because they won't be financially substantial for themselves, and thus they will be rejected by their families. If you send as a government message that you're willing to accept that you approve that, yes, you're going to be.
If you are still dependent on your family for financial support, you probably shouldn't be marrying and disappearing. And we do actually, and quite simply, it's not a good idea to go off and split off because any kind of marriage is a form of independence. But even looking at this idea of people who are afraid to leave their cultural norms, if they don't believe that their love is strong enough to be able to say that we need to surmount our challenges, we need to be together no matter what, that's an incredibly weak marriage. If you're incentivizing them to go into a marriage that they don't actually believe in, that they don't want to fight for until death do us part, or whatever other vows they're going to swear, it's not a weak marriage, it's not strengthening the institution of marriage, and it's not creating strong bonds, which is the actual mandate of the state in creating marriages for their actual reasons. So with that, I want to go into my actual constructive material. I want to talk about cultural bonding. If we want to create greater cohesion between groups, then the best way that you create cohesion is by creating understanding, a desire to learn, a way that you can go forward and actually learn tolerance. But here all you're doing is putting a monetary price on this kind of bizarre idea of marriage. There's no real benefit to the people that this will affect, because they've already been interested. And there will be people who scam this system. The government got up and put in their model that these tax breaks won't be sufficient to cause people to use a scam. But then they're probably pretty useless to these families or these partners that are trying to get into these marriages anyways. It's not a real incentivization if it doesn't change people's behavior, and it's going to change their behavior so they're going to use this as a scam, or there's not going to be enough benefit.
Sir.
Getting into my second constructive about the idea of weak marriages, I want to point out the fact that if you're going to incentivize people to marry, then you're going to be bringing people together who otherwise would not have married. People whose bond is not strong enough to say that they want to marry no matter what. Instead, what you're going to be saying is that we want to marry because there is money in getting into this marriage. There is money in marrying you, and therefore I'm going to. Those are weak marriages. Those are marriages that are going to become divorces. That does not strengthen the institution of marriage. That does not strengthen the state's mandate as a result.
In order to get benefit less than 10% per year, only for 3 years, I have to find another people from outside from ethnic and religion. Does that sound not make sense?
So basically what you're saying is that because it's going to be a tax incentive that there's no problem, but you could still marry someone just for the money. It's entirely possible when you're increasing the amount of money that you're allowing them to marry for, because currently the only reason why we incentivize marriage in any way and offer some tax breaks for married couples is because there are associated costs with children. There are demonstrated costs to going into a marriage for the thing that the state wants you to do once you're married. That being have children, start a family, create net assets, buy a house, buy a car. All of these very expensive things that do require some level of compensation. But there's no added compensation as a result here. This is an incentive program that they're trying to create. It's trying to get people into these marriages. And if you're going to be providing enough money to make a substantial difference to someone's subsistence, they are going to use it as a scam. We can also look at the optics of this situation, because by incentivizing this program, you are demonstrating that it is undesirable. You are saying that this is something that a lot of people see as very bad, and so because it is so bad, because it is so difficult and problematic, we are going to be admitting as the state that we need to incentivize this behavior. Because despite the fact that they all find it abhorrent, the state still finds some nebulous reason for why it's better, something that they haven't really established, given the reasons that I've already shown. We can also see that we're creating ethnicity and religion as a commodity instead of something that is inherent. And this flies in the face of non-discrimination. Because when you put a monetary value on something like race or religion, you are inherently making them different. You are inherently making them something that is emphasized. The state is now recognizing your race. The state is now recognizing your religion and saying that they are things which are the state's business, that the state is going to give you money for being black and marrying a white person or any other ethnicity or race or religion. It is an admission by the state that these things are unequal. It is an admission by the state that these things aren't the same, that it is abhorrent, and as a result we cannot accept its incentivization.
Right, we thank the Leader of Opposition for his speech, and now invite the second speaker from opening government, the Deputy Prime Minister.
The question that never been answered by the opposition side of the House is that what makes them think that this couple is the same as an equal as the ordinary couples? Because we say that it is totally different conditions between the ordinary couples and between interfaith and interrace marriages, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why a different characteristic of every single individuals or every single marriages that happens in the countries has to be valued by the countries toward the different kind of treatment, toward different kind of protections. We say that this is a kind of the protection that's given by the country throughout the different kind of conditions that's being faced by this kind of couples. So they are trying to say that it is their own interest anyway. This is their personal decisions. But the problem is that the role of the state has to go beyond over personal decisions. Sometimes personal decision is not enough to make someone stand up in order to maintain their life, for example. And that's why the state is come over there and try to protect them. For example, in the case of subsidy, a lot of minority people, probably poor people, got subsidy for a government because the government think that they cannot manage their life if the government did not give them subsidy. So there are a different kind of treatment that has been given to the state in order to make them, in order to make the individual survive, ladies and gentlemen. So going to what there happen is that they never being like explain or actually giving a proposals or actually giving a solution how they could solve the problems on them as of these interrace and interfaith marriages, ladies and gentlemen. How the psychological burden for the societies. They're saying that the cultural bond will be there. But then again, there is no action at all from the government. And the government did not do anything. What the government should do is that the government promoting this with the clear stances and give a clear policy for this kind of couples. Not only condone their marriages, but only to the extent that they are incentivizing the financially incentivize these couples, ladies and gentlemen. So going to my rebuttals. First rebuttal, they are saying that it will marginalize the group. We are saying that it will not be happens, but the fact is that this group is already marginalized from their own community. When they are already, it's happened when they are already choosing their own couple, for example. They're being disowned by their family. Let's take examples of the interfaith marriages, probably in conventional cultures. They will be disowned by the family because the family think that they did not deserve each other's. Well, so what happens is that when your own faith, your own life depends on your community, probably, or you think that probably we don't understand why they are being so faithful, for example, and it is being so hard for them. But the government is trying to understand what they want at the very first place and try to make it and try to compensate that over their policy, ladies and gentlemen. So what we are trying to say is that you don't marginalize the group, but what happened is that you do marginalize the group when you did not giving any kind of policy toward this kind of couples. Because what happened with them is that there are a different kind of treatment that has been given, which I will be explain to you in my points of extension, which is talking about how it is the fall over, or it is a way step forward about the protection overall of marriages for the government, ladies and gentlemen. So, second points of the battles. Yes, before that. Yes, sir.
This proposal will cause assimilation and therefore disappearance of a lot of ethnic minorities. This is a very bad thing.
The problem is that the appearances of the ethnic minority is saying that because you don't want to accept each other's, you don't want to create any tolerance, and if you did not doing anything, ladies and gentlemen, what happened is that yes, you put them in dangers, yes, you disown them, and in the extreme level, you probably kill the supposed, ladies and gentlemen. You have to clear the stand. You have to clear You have to send the clear messages that it is not a wrong thing to do, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why the government supporting it in terms of their own policy. Rather than you did not do anything and you are saying that you're okay if you want to do this and it is your own risk and you will be disappeared. That's not what the government do, because the government realizes there are a problem that should be solved at this kind of problem. So second point of rebuttals, which is like talking about the spam and scam. We are saying that there will be no scam at all. That's why there are a proposal and there are a mechanism that being provided by Mr. Denny, which is saying that there will be 3 years and the cut taxes is only 1%, for example. So why we are saying that it is really probably, it is not really big, but it is valued by them as it is something that is support from the government. That is what really important that's coming from this. And we are saying that who wants to be this one for their family? It is important like that. So the question that still remains is that the government is biased to them. The government is supporting what they did, and the government did not mention it at all. And the government is showing their real actions in order to make them still survive, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, before that.
How does it help them get over like the stigmas that are created when not only are they committing sin against their community, they're also getting paid for it?
Exactly, ladies and gentlemen. You never say that. You never could explain to us how you're going to compensate those kind of stigmatizations phenomenon, ladies and gentlemen. We are saying that the stigmatizations happens, and we are saying that we are trying to solve it, but we are giving them, compensate them with the money, ladies and gentlemen. You never say that. You prefer to avoid the conflict that might be happen, which is we are saying that this is not what we want to do. The conflict that will be happens is that if you create exclusivity inside your community, if you don't want your community to marry to the other races, and because you are saying that it's not good at all, even you are saying that it is really okay, for example, to disown your own race or disown your own daughters just because they are married to the other people. This is the kind of protection that we want to give to them. So going to my points of extension, first of all, form of protection that coming from the government. We are saying that different kind of condition that should be given, different kind of protection. What kind of different condition that being faced by this kind of couple? First of all, they are become, like Mr. Denny have already explained to you how it is very morally wrong for them, for example, to counter their own faith at the very first place. And suddenly they are coming brave and saying that they want to marry this kind of a girl or boy, for example. And second, it is very brave for them to say no to their family. It is a very huge mental and psychological issue inside them that they have to struggle on. So we say that the kind of the protection that has to be protected by the government have to be different too. Because at the very first place, if you're compared to another couple, they are falling in love and they could get married and their family will be okay, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. And the government would allow it. And that's the extent of the protection that the government could give. Because in the end of the day, they will be happy. That's what they wanted. But the question will be remain that what happened with this kind of couple? We are saying that they will not be happy as that. So we are saying that it is a protection over them in terms of the law of marriages itself. How the government is protecting them, not only in terms of giving them a chance to marry, but government is responsible what happened with them after they're married, ladies and gentlemen. This is a really important matter, and we are saying that it is a step forward over the development of the protection over our citizens, meaning that the government already succeeds in making differentiations between their societies. So this is the interest of the state to create the protection over the couple. Thank you.
Okay, we thank the Deputy Prime Minister for the speech and now invite second speaker of opening opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, what I'm going to begin is I'm going to begin going through a bit of the case that's been brought up before us, before I move into a bit of a reconstructive and my own constructive case. First thing that I want to talk about is the actual pragmatic consequences of the model proposed, which I think need to be addressed once again, because we got clarification of what the model was in a POI from side government. Okay. The first thing is that if it's what they've tried to tell you is that these people face inter-ethnic or interfaith marriages, face severe financial burdens when they attempt to get married. So that's what they tried to tell us. And then they told us that as this is the result, we need to compensate them for this loss that they occur. The thing is that if it is compensation for an incurred cost that would occur anyway, then you don't have incentivization of the marriages themselves at all. So all their arguments about why we want these types of marriages would fall if that was the consequence of their model. Now, let's pretend that it actually is incentivized. These types of marriages are incentivized by their model. We see that there are two major consequences of this. First, these marriages won't last. The reason being is that the only reason why, one of the major contributing factors to why they enter into this marriage is this financial incentive. Now the problem, of course, is that that financial incentive expires after 3 years because it is a tax break for 3 years. So of course, if they required an incentive to get into their marriage and keep that marriage, and then suddenly after 3 years that incentive's gone, then very clearly that if that incentive was required for them to be in that marriage, they're not going to keep in the marriage. That incentive for the marriage disappears after 3 years. The final thing, of course, is that the other consequences is that they are marriages of convenience. You have two atheists with large incomes decide, okay, you pretend to be Catholic, you pretend to be Protestant, not particularly hard to do. You get married, you have large incomes, you suddenly get 10% off your tax bill for 3 years. That's a major financial incentive, which no possible safeguards can be put in place. Like, it's just not possible to try to monitor for something like that. No, thank you. So as a result, we see then, of course, it's going to be open to scams, it's going to be open to things. The other thing that we think is very problematic about this model is that most of the cultural groups that you're dealing with that you need to incentivize interfaith marriage, inter-ethnic marriages of, that they characterize, are cultures that have dowry systems. So all you're in essence doing on-side government is reinforcing this conception of marriage as a financial institution in which there is an exchange of wealth in order for the marriage to happen. So one of the major problems that we see with many ethnic groups and in terms of the abuse of women in these ethnic groups is their regard as a financial burden, and that's why you have a dowry system. All they do is further stress to these particular ethnic groups that that is the case, that there is a financial burden associated with marriage. Okay. Then they had this idea of, we want to send the message to the populace that inter-ethnic marriage and interfaith marriages are not wrong. The thing is, we've already done that. The way we did that was we legalized them and created programs to get rid of segregation, to get rid of things like that, for example, in the United States, it's in other places. So we've sent the message, already sent the message that it's not wrong. Now the issue now the issue becomes, do we want to send the message that we really want you to get into these types of marriages? And I'm going to be talking about it in my constructive of why that's not the type of thing we want. And finally, though, on this issue of stigma, that there is a stigma attached to these things, and this model reduces it. Well, what you're actually doing is saying, there is a stigma, we're going to bribe you to violate the fact that there is a stigma. So in other words, what we're in essence, and I'll take you in a moment, and what we're in essence saying is that we think that there's a stigma, we're going to accept that there's a stigma, we just want you to try to overcome it, which just reinforces to the communities themselves that stigma exists. Sure.
Sir, this has led us to separation of those ethnic and religious groups, which now has the tensions between the rest of the society. Why do you think that removing the tension is wrong?
Okay, you're just creating more tension by saying between these groups, you're identifying them as explicit and distinct groups that we want to merge and make in contact, and the way in which we are going to do that is to bribe them to do so. That stresses that they are different to the overall society. It stresses to them that there is a difference between them. No, thank you. And as a result, merely reinforces any form of tension that you're looking at. Alright, moving on to my constructive arguments. What is the reason why a state incentivizes marriage in the first place? We have to recognize that the purpose of marriage, as far as the state is concerned, is eventually the production of children, the expansion of the population of a particular state. While you have marriages as unions of love, fundamentally the marriage boils down to a continuation of the population. That's why you provide tax incentives to marriage, is to put them into a better financial state in which they are able to have children. We want to say outside opposition, we think that that's perfectly fine. We think it's a good thing to incentivize marriages themselves and allow them to be able to be in a better financial position to have children. What we think, though, is the problem in this circumstance is that you are in essence reducing people to, and I'm going to use the term breeding stock. In essence, what you're saying is that children that are multi-faith or multi-ethnic are better or more valuable to the state than uni-faith or uni-ethnic children. And no matter what you do, because you are paying money for people to have these types of children and have these types of relationships, you are necessarily incentivizing the creation of more multi-faith and multi-ethnic children, and then establishing that they also have a greater value to the state because you are paying for their production. So, as a result, like, what we see here is that we have a situation where we have a claim sort of harm that, oh, these people aren't intermarrying, but of course, like, we can see statistically that the majority of ethnic groups are intermarrying. Like, it's not a major problem that they're not. But you're sending a message that we need to break them up. We need them to start marrying. They're so valuable to our society that we have to have these types of children. We have to have these types of marriages, which we think sends a very, very bad message to the overall society, stating that one type of thing that people can be involved in is significantly better than another. As a result, we think this leads to the type of discrimination that we've seen in the past. This is, in essence, a discriminatory act that undermines any validity that these marriages could possibly have. So, for the problems that this model has, for the problems that we think we have with the actual principle on which it is governed, we beg to oppose. Thank you.
Right, we thank the Deputy of Opposition for his speech. The debate now moves to the closing half and invite the first speaker from Closing Government.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members of the House, we want to bring this debate home. Firstly, we want to talk about what government should and supposed to do. Secondly, we want to talk about segregation equals isolation and where we lie now in the status quo. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, we want to talk about the offsprings from those families. But first things first. Government is supposed to promote freedoms, values, understanding, and tolerance in our multicultural societies in which we do live today. Now, we are saying that and rebuttal is going on. Now, we are saying that we, in a society, in every state which is multicultural, we appreciate every child same, because for instance, third child, you get the same amount of money. It doesn't matter which faith or which ethnicity you are. If you're the citizen of our country, you get the same amount of money. But this is the thing. The contribution to the society is what we accept as something valuable. That's when we financially incentivize our citizens when they are contributing to our society. For instance, blood donation. For instance, donating organs. For instance, having a third job. For instance, paying humanitarian aid. Then you get tax reliefs. Now, in all those kinds of situations, we are incentivizing our people to do so, to contribute to our society. Now, we believe this is a contribution to our society. And now we go into the heart of this debate. Now, what is very important? In the status quo, segregation of all those people, ethnicities, religious groups, brought us to isolation. They are keeping themselves within their boundaries. They are having the oppression because they have fear from traditional family education in their societies that they're actually threatened by the society. But anyway, no thank you. Now, why do we believe that this is very important to break those old traditional fences? Because we believe that this is leading to the integration of our people and to functional society. And we as a government are not supposed, but we are obliged to provide one. Now we believe that multiculturalism in today's world is very important. We believe that understanding them on ethnicity and religions are very important. Because now, thank you, because now we see, for instance, in societies that do not have this, no thank you, even in EU, we have Islamophobia. In other countries, we have fear from the different isolated communities, because when you're isolated, you're pretty much excommunicated. We do not know your values, you do not appreciate ours, because you are afraid that we are going to break yours. We believe that that should be stopped. We believe that this is our obligation. No thank you. Now we believe also that by giving this incentive, we are sending a message that yes, you are free to do so, and we agree on that point. Now, what is the status quo with those pairs? Now, for instance, the girl or the guy from one ethnicity or religion falls in love with another one. Now, they said we did incentivize it with the legalization. The legalization is just removing the legal barriers from that marriages. It's not the incentive. Now, when they go into relationships, they probably hide it from their families, but they're unable to do that if they go into a marriage. They do not have the other side. They have just their families giving the pressure on them that they're doing the wrong thing. With this, we're giving the message, we're giving the other sides to them. We're saying, no, it's perfectly fine, it's okay, and you're contributing to the society and to multiculturalism and to understanding among those people if you do so. Closing.
Sir, don't you think that it's completely normal for a culture to feel that it is threatened by assimilation and therefore not want to have these marriages? Which
Thank you
will
very
erase
much.
their culture?
We're going to touch the assimilation just now. Let's see what happens if this principle works, as it did in Sarajevo, for instance. Offsprings from those families were the ones who were highly educated for tolerance, for understanding among religions, ethnicities. Now, the offsprings are more educated than any other people from those mixed marriages, are more educated from any other people because the core of the society, the family, is the one who educates them. They are seeing that from their example of their parents, which are usually their role models. They know and they understand what tolerance means, why the understanding among the religion and ethnicities is very important. Those are most highly tolerant people in our society. Now, thank you. In Sarajevo, which was in Yugoslavia, when war began, that was the only city in the war zone which didn't have war among religions. Why? Because that was the city where three religions, Islam, Catholics, and the Pravoslavs were living together for decades, incentivized by their city alone. So the city government paid them, and they had multicultural society which did know and understand among each other. Now, when the war began, in every building they were taking shifts. During the day, for instance, one guy which has faith Islam, second guy is in the afternoon, and third guy which is from Orthodox. Are keeping the buildings from the intruders in the war. Now we are saying that is the example where those two religions are close and keeping together because they respect each other as a people, and that's what we as a government respect, not dividing themselves by ethnical or religious standings. We are saying that it was the example, Mr. Speaker, when they were working together and when we saw this model implemented, working for a long-term solution. Sir,
we're not dealing with nations that have massive interracial violence. We're dealing with nations like Canada and Britain or France that don't have this type of conflict occurring.
Sir, we're saying that this is working everywhere because, Mr. Speaker, after that, when that war began and ended, never mind. But this is the example how it began and how those people did understand each other and were not fighting and having any pressure or tension among each other. We're saying that this is very important. Thirdly, we're saying this is very, very crucial for this. Among all of those ethnicities and religions, we're saying that it is better to have a functional society of tolerance and understanding than to have divided people on any standings. We believe that people in our country should respect themselves because they're equal, because they are people and they have and share the same values and same rights. We do not feel that we should remove the incentive for those people to engage in those marriages, and most important, to provide us future generations that will understand the ethnicity and religion among themselves, not creating tension and not having wars among themselves. And that's why we beg you to go back.
Right, the House thanks the Member of Government for his speech and now invites the first speaker from closing opposition, the Member of Opposition.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so what have we seen in this debate up until now? First of all, we had the case from the first half of the proposition in which they tried to explain to us how this will actually incentivize, young people to marry outside of their ethos. Now, they didn't try to explain to us why this is good, and like opposition has told you, we believe this is bad, and I'm going to expand on that. And first opposition, and then started explaining to you the damages of this. Okay, they started explaining how you create understanding, how you actually try to bring people together, not by money. And they also explained to you how these marriages will be. They told you how these marriages will be unstable, and the message that it sends to these minorities that they're not okay. So what's going to be our extension for today, ladies and gentlemen? First of all, I'm going to explain to you how this. I'm going to prove to you how this creates unstable families, which is a very bad thing for the state. Then I'm going to explain to you how it destroys pluralism and hurts minorities. Before I do that, of course, let me do a rebuttal. So the speaker before me pretty much, tried to tell that the government's role is to incentivize things, that we believe in. Okay, that's great, except this causes something we don't believe in. This causes unstable families, this causes radicalization, this causes disappearance of minority groups. So, obviously this is not something we want to incentivize. And then he tried to tell us how, right now they're segregated and this will integrate them. Okay, so he said this causes integration and multiculturalism. No, ladies and gentlemen, this causes disappearance of minorities, which is exactly the opposite of multiculturalism. It causes uniculturalism because these parents are disappearing. He tried to explain to us how this teaches people to get along. If you want to teach people to get along, ladies and gentlemen, educate them to get along. Do not incentivize them to marry outside their groups. Do not send the message that their group is not okay. In all the examples he gave, this wasn't solved by incentivizing people to intermarry. This is solved by, bringing them together in the same room to talk, ladies and gentlemen, as we've seen in a lot of other people, to talk to each other, to learn about each other. You do not have to marry one another to learn about each other. Me and Michael get along very well. We've talked quite often, and ladies and gentlemen, we're not married.
Shame.
Sorry. And beyond that, he tried to tell us that this sends the message to these people who are getting married that you are free. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've already done that. It's legal. That's the message we've sent. You are free to do this if you want. That's what legalizing it means. Then he tries to tell us that the government is giving the message that it's okay. So, these people will now listen to the government rather than listen to their families. Yeah. Because it's been working so well in all these places, that these people are going to say, well, my family and my culture and everything for thousands of years has been telling me this is wrong, but now the government says it's right, so sure, I'm going to jump ahead and do it. No, ladies and gentlemen, all it's going to tell these minorities is that the government doesn't agree with you, and this is, a bad thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, why does this create unstable families? Well, first of all, obviously, as has been explained in the first half, a state's interest is for stable families. This is why we incentivize it today. It creates babies and stable children and, higher education. You're going to argue with that. No. Okay? This is a great thing in our opinion. This, though, specifically causes unstable families. Why is this? Okay? Well, we've got a lot of reasons why these families are unstable. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, we've got the cultural reason. These people have grown up, have grown up for quite a while, have grown up for quite a while learning different things, acting different ways, learning, this is the man's role, this is the woman's role, learning, this is okay, this is how you raise children, this isn't how you raise children, I think at the end of my point. So, these are, their cultures are very different. Beyond that, most of these people have very different religion. So, am I supposed to now celebrate Eid al-Fitr, or am I supposed to celebrate Hanukkah, or am I supposed to celebrate Christmas? These people don't really know what's going on. What am I raising my children to believe in? Beyond that, their customs vary. Their customs sometimes vary. Either they're different or sometimes they are exactly against each other. And, this causes the family not to be easy. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, their families are opposed to this marriage. I mean, this is, at the heart of the proposition. Okay? So, once families are opposed to each other, it's a very, very, I'm taking consent so you can sit down. It's a very, very difficult problem for the newlyweds because their family doesn't agree. It puts pressure on them constantly, that this is not an okay marriage. Not only that, this incentivizes people to marry early because the most people who are going to be incentivized by this are people who, who lack the ability to get out on their own, or it's difficult for them to get out on their own. So they want the tax return, so they're going to marry early, much earlier than they're ready to be part of a marriage or raise children, so they're going to be much less stable because, they're just not ready for it. So pretty much, I've proven to you now, through all these explanations and examples, that definitely creates unstable families. Before I go on, yes?
Sir, if you really think that it's create unstable and harm your country, why you allow it in the first place?
No, because I only see it as unstable once. Soon. But pretty much the problem now is that if it is incentivized, if these two people have decided and looked at their differences and thought it out and taken their time to do it because they're not marrying early, then they've worked everything out and they'll probably be okay. What you're doing now is you're incentivizing them to do it as quickly as possible. You're incentivizing them to not think it through and to do that. So ladies and gentlemen, no, this destroys pluralism. Well, obviously pluralism is very good for us. It gives different ideas. Everyone feels that they fit in, and it gives equal opportunity. It tells everyone that they have a say, which is a very good thing. That's why we try to keep pluralism as much as possible in all of the Western liberal democracies today. Now, when two people from different ethos marry, their ethos disappears, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is a fact. Let's look, for example, at religions. In Islam, then you're only Muslim if your father is a Muslim. So if a Muslim woman marries a Christian man, then their kids aren't Muslim. Same thing, by the way. Exactly the opposite. In Judaism, okay, the only person who's Jewish is if their mother is Jewish. So my father is Jewish and my mother is Christian, guess what? I'm not Jewish anymore. So pretty much these people are disappearing. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, even with ethos, no thank you. These people are actually away from their customs, okay? If a Muslim person in the United States marries a Christian person, they're going to be living away from Muslim families. I mean, they've already told us that they're going to kick them out of the family, so now they're only living around Christian ethos. So also their kids don't learn their Muslim ethos, and suddenly, these people are going and disappearing. So minorities disappear. Now, why will this always go to the majority, ladies and gentlemen? Well, Christians in the world today are 33.2% of the world population. In most Western liberal democracies, they are the majority. So obviously, everything is going to go towards them, because like I just explained to you, if a Jew, a Muslim, a Hindi, whatever, marries a Christian, African American, marries a white Protestant, whatever, then they disappear. So it destroys pluralism. Not only that, it tells the minorities that we are disappearing them. Okay, it makes them matter, makes them more radical. It destroys pluralism. There was a rabbi that actually said about Israel that the worst problem of Judaism is not all the armies posed against them, but actually assimilation in the United States. And this is as a government we're telling them, please. This is as a government we're telling them we are going to assimilate. We're incentivizing assimilating. Ladies and gentlemen, I call on you to oppose.
Just a note to the teams, keep the discussions among yourselves a little quiet. It's a small room, you're interrupting the speakers. Right, we thank the member of opposition for his speech. The final speech on the government bench. I invite government.
Mr. Speaker, sir, ladies and gentlemen of the House, it's nice to be a whip speaker on such a debate. Ladies and gentlemen, this debate is all about tolerance, and whether we as a government appreciate people who increase the tolerance in multicultural societies, and how do we value them and their contribution that they are putting, an effort that they are trying, an example that they are setting for the rest of the people, therefore the rest of our citizens. Basically, this debate comes to 3 points. Now, on the lower half of the table, we had the clash about misusage, whether the people will misuse this. Secondly, we had the problem of, I want to elaborate on when we as a government give initiative to our citizens for some, and for what are the deeds for which we grant them certain rewards, let's say, or compensations, that was wrongly that was wrongly elaborated from the side of the opposition. Thirdly, I want to talk about who is this actually meant for, which was also neglected from the side of the opposition. And finally, about what is the government saying with this. But before that, let's see what the previous speaker brought to the table. Firstly, He talked about it's already illegal, so we allowed it. Ladies and gentlemen, when we ban something sometimes, when something is not illegal, it's not enough for not happening in society. Like, we forbid hate speech, let's say, but it still happens. We forbid interracial, interethnic intolerance, but it still happens, ladies and gentlemen. We simply say that at some points, at some cases, we have to give initiative as a state, like we do it for let's say organ donors. We admit that they contributed to society in a certain way. They made the better welfare for all of us in a certain manner. So we want them to reward them with something and to say, yes, it's a good deed that you've done. And if there are other people who are maybe they're thinking of doing it, there is initiative, and the state will recognize them as the contributors to the society. But when they talk about misuse, ladies and gentlemen, we simply don't think that someone will give his kidney in order to get a tax relief. What I mean by that is the old side of the opposition sees this contradict themselves when they are talking to the point of the misuse, because at one point they see the religious communities in our society as extreme, but they are ready to forget about it just to get the tax relief, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the problem of all four of them. They don't see these people rational. Now, who are we actually talking about, ladies and gentlemen, here? Like my colleague nicely mentioned, firstly, many of the people that are already in inter-ethnic or inter-religious relationship, they can't get that final step because they don't get the initiative. Because there is nobody from the government saying it's completely okay, and we understand that at one point you went from your community and they are then you have problems because you want to go interracial or inter-ethnic marriage user.
If the side opposition seriously believes that if a relationship can only exist when you bribe the participants to participate in it, it's going to be a stable relationship.
No, we don't think so. I don't know why do you think that we bribe them, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, the point that they are actually advocating is already happening, but it's not happening in our case. It's happening in other occasions. If someone marries into the money, we cannot stop that. That's on the individual who are getting in the marriage to decide on themselves whether someone is getting rigged in that relationship. We see, but we cannot control who are you marrying. We don't say if you have money, only if you have equal amount of money both spouses have equal amount of money, then you can marry. So such a mistakes like they are mentioning can already happen, and we cannot control that as a state. No, thank you. Now, when the previous speaker also talks about the assimilation, the problem they have with it is because we don't talk about actually minorities marrying only majorities, ladies and gentlemen. Because it doesn't mean if you're a different religion or a different ethnic group that one is minority or one is a majority. Especially, let's say, the example that Milan used, my colleague, in Sarajevo, where every of the religion and every of ethnics were equally represented in the society. But, ladies and gentlemen, who is more tolerant, actually, to teach these kids the same tolerance, the children that are coming from such marriages, then exactly the people who were already done the step of getting a spouse of a different religion or a different ethnic group. When they say they will not know what to believe in, it doesn't have to be. Firstly, even if that happens, it means that one of the spouses haven't had such a belief in. And you cannot blame someone if wasn't so radical in his religion or not. If they are radical ones, they wouldn't get married anyway, so they want to assimilate. If they assimilate, it means that their religion wasn't so important for them. And thirdly, we believe that that is the group of the population that will teach those kids, let's say, your father is this religion. And this is what we believe in. We simply believe that, they allow themselves to choose what to believe, although they married maybe in different religion, that the same choice will leave alone for their children but will be more informed than the many other members of the society. Yes, you.
But doesn't telling these young rebels that they're right mean that you're telling the rest of the community that their values are wrong? That the state is going to discriminate against you for your values?
No, that means just that they will tell that we are not wrong. and even when doing so, they will have a support of the state, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what is important here, to show the example, to say, yes, you are right for doing so. Yes, you contributed to society, because we now have the increase of tolerance among this religion. Because if there are more and more of those couples, and it will be, because sometimes now people, only because of that stigma that exists in society, do not get married, although they are in a relationship. They keep it secret from the rest of their families and other cousins. But in this way, they will have a support from the state that is saying, yes, it's perfectly normal what you're doing, and it's perfectly accepted, and you are actually contributing to such deeds are not done. We explained you that misusages will not going to happen. I explained you clearly how this increases tolerance in society, and how origins of these marriages will actually be the bear holders of the next generation with the tolerant one. Thank you.
Right, thank the government whip speaker for his speech. For the final speech of today's debate, we now invite, and the day today, opposition whip.
Mr. Speaker, the government's main burden of proof for us, as in every debate, is to prove why is this good for the state. Except telling us some stories about why this might create tolerance, we just have not heard that. I will prove to you why the tolerance claim is simply not on their side. I'm going to talk to you about two things. I'm going to talk to you about why cleansing via marriage is not tolerance. If anything, it's wiping out. And then I'm going to talk to you about a bad marriage is not what the state wants, and therefore just shouldn't pay for it. And I'll use this, hopefully, with showing what opposition you're showing you today, and why there is no way we should take what they're offering. But first, as a necessity, I must give some rebuttal. First of all, I'm going to talk about a few things. They claim minorities will create more minority. They said that their proposition does not necessarily include majorities just marrying the minorities or stuff like that, which we knew when we said that. But what we're saying is that statistically, and my partners brought you the statistics, where, for example, 33% of the world are Christian, where, for example, I'm using the Jewish example because I'm one. Actually, you have 0.2% of Jews. They will necessarily assimilate into the majority eventually as time. No, thank you. As time progresses. This is simple. There's no other way to explain this. Then they said that the children will teach tolerance and be better to know. I'm saying that if a minority doesn't exist, you can't teach tolerance towards it. You can teach its history. And this is actually something that happened. The Armenians, which are assimilating now, the Aramaic speakers in Syria are an excellent example when right now there's only one village left where people actually speak Aramaic because they assimilated into Syrian society. This isn't a bad thing necessarily, but there is no reason why we should actually put that forward and let the Aramaic language die, for example. And this is exactly what you guys are proposing.
Sir.
Now, no thank you. Now I'm going to talk about why cleansing via marriage is not tolerance. Now, the government claim to tolerance, first off, has shown you that the declarative problem is saying, listen, race matters. Listen, religion matters, and actually adding to that a nice little bribe. And that desire to learn about one another, is tolerance, and not actually the desire to tell one another to come into my ethnicity and something like that. Gov spoke very feverishly, about multiculturalism, and their solution actually ends multiculturalism because of exactly what my partner explained. Because if you are solving segregation by destroying another culture, by making it officially disappear eventually, then you are not, then you are not creating any sort of multiculturalism. You are surely but slowly destroying that minority within us. And I'll get more to that. No, thank you. Then they mentioned Yugoslavia, which I think was great, because Yugoslavia was exactly a place where we have reports of Bosnian women being raped by Serbians just for the sake to create more babies to a specific a specific majority to the point of creating a specific majority and to allow it to be the majority and be more created. And I think that was a bad representation on that curve. Now, my partner actually told you that while, for example, privileged Jew being married, he's being disappeared into the assimilation abyss. And this is something that will always only benefit the majority in the way that it will create a unicultural society, because eventually, statistically, there is no other way for this to happen except that the large group will eventually eat the smaller groups. No, thank you. Okay? And this will always, so what will happen is we will lose pluralism. Pluralism is something that we actually enjoy because it creates freedom of ideas. It gives everyone the opportunity to know that they can express themselves and enjoy themselves. And this is something my partner has spoke about. I'll take you in a second. Okay? But we believe that by creating less pure pluralism, you tell these people that their religion and faith and culture is under attack. That we are substantially giving money into a system that will make them disappear eventually. Yes, sir?
It's ridiculous because if a person has a two identity like a Chinese and a Japanese or Chinese and Caucasian, he cannot involve in contributing to society with multiculturalism. It's basically not making any sense, because if you are a person, you simply will contribute a multicultural issue, because you still could promote tolerance at the end of the time.
Again, bring two countries like China and Japan, which have billions of people. Again, one marriage like this is not the problem. It's not going to kill a minority. What we're saying, but no, thank you. I've already just taken a question. What we're saying is that, but the smaller country, the smaller populations, Judaism as an example, Sikh in India and stuff like that, will eventually find themselves in a situation where they're disappearing into the majority, and their culture and their tradition, and no, thank you, and everything they have given us will be disappearing with them because they've simply married into that. And Al-Had has also shown you why the person who is married a Christian will be much more likely, for example, in the United States, to become a Christian himself, because there are more churches, because society is more Christian in itself, and because it is easier just to become part of the majority, as it is in many places. No, thank you. I have to move to my next point. Now, why is bad marriage not something we want? They kept creating that we need to insinuate this, and we need to show you why they haven't answered their burden of proof. We agree with first off completely that the incentive actually can hurt and create worse marriages, and that it can be vulnerable to schemes. Now, the interesting thing is that the government explained all the hardships of multi-ethnic and multi-religion things. They told us that the person has to leave their family, and they told us the person has to sometimes fight with the family, and they told us the person has to give up all these things. We say yes, exactly. This is why we believe these weddings are more problematic and less stable. Sir. The state, no thank you. The state would want, no thank you. The state would want stable families. The state wants a cultural, the state doesn't want you to deal with cultural differences. No thank you. With cultural differences. The state doesn't want you to the state doesn't want you to deal with different religions and having problems within your marriage. No, thank you, all of you. The state doesn't want you to be dealing with different religions that are important for stability and questions which are family. The families who are opposed to them also creates pressure, as my partner says, because the outer family keeps telling him, why did you marry that girl? She's not of our faith. Why did you do all these things? Exactly what the government has told us that we should be compensating them about. Now, and we say that these are exactly what creates marriages that are less stable and less good for the government, because we also believe that families are the building block of society. And if you look at the society in general, you see that these sort of things actually create worse families and families that are less likely to survive. In a POI, we were asked if it's so bad, why is it allowed? There are lots of things I allow you that I don't necessarily want to pay you for doing. You can go and get drunk on the street. It doesn't mean I want to give you an incentive just because I allow you to do it, and it doesn't mean it doesn't have bad things into it. What these marriages actually create is more ugly divorce, because once there's a divorce, everyone tends to return to their own religion, and the child is stuck in the middle. Okay, so finally the question is, can you do this? Absolutely, but the state has no interest in paying you to actually do this sort of thing, which is less stable and less good for you, and in that less good for everyone else, because that's the building block of society. So what have we shown you today? We've shown you why this is definitely a way of ethnic cleansing for small groups, and we have shown you why this is a necessarily bad marriage, and we have no incentive to actually support bad marriage. For all these reasons, I beg to oppose.
Thank you very much. Thank all the teams. Invite you to cross the floor and shake hands.